Hello, my name is Maywitic and welcome to Her Conversations, Tools for the Awakening Woman. Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. This is the optimal state to embody in order to attract our highest desires. Who is the awakening woman? She is a woman who's seeking a greater possibility in her reality and looking for solutions. She knows being awakened is not a lofty ideal but a necessity. If she can transform herself, she can change the world. Her Conversations will introduce you to talented women who will speak to your spirituality, sensuality, and soul. They share their stories and explain how they are in service to the world. So let their words and these conversations embolden and inspire you. This week, my guest is Jelena Virijevic. She's the founder of The Will, the Women's Intentional Life Lessons, a custom-created female empowerment program. During our conversation, we discuss what bringing in the feminine looks like for both men and women, how the Me Too movement has affected the working landscape 2 years later, how to craft a space for yourself when you also have children and a relationship. Jelena also shares how she integrates her spiritual practice into her work for herself and her clients. So as always, I begin by asking my guests, Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. When do you feel your most her?
First, Carol, I just want to say thank you. And the area where I probably feel the most her is when I am in a space of holding kind of energetically a vibration for others and being able to support others in that way. And to maybe be a little bit more specific, my daily practice, I primarily practice Kundalini yoga and meditation. And I have over 15 years experience in kind of executive world, corporate life. And for me, being able to bridge those two worlds together has definitely been a process. But after I do that practice and after I'm in the space of kind of just closer to self, and I can kind of access that vibration, then I really have kind of I call it my superpower. And I'm able to kind of go into the world and then also hold that kind of space for others and allow others to, it sounds a little cheesy, but like step into their level of greatness and support them. And so as I started over the years coaching and helping to sponsor other women and develop them in the workplace, I just felt like it wasn't enough. And then I felt called to help them with their transformation in a larger way. And without, again, getting into all the weeds, but starting this mastermind, the mastermind I started last year was really about being able to hold that space for them for a much longer period of time. And as you know, these kind of transformations, especially when we're doing deep work on ourselves, they take time. It's not just, a strategy call or a couple months, online course or something like that. And all those things are great, but really it's how do we marry all the different ways in which we learn and provide something of high value. So when last night I was, we're in the 5th month of the first round of the program and we have calls on Monday nights. And so I just get off those calls feeling super high because we're in the midst of so many layers being unveiled and you're just seeing these women radiating, stepping into who they were meant to be. We talked a lot about how do you bring spirituality into your work life. The big topic was around, so I meditate in the morning, I feel great, and then I go into work, and then I just feel this disconnection from myself. And so we talked a lot about how being spiritual is really a way of life. It's not just something we do when we're on our mat, and seeing all the light bulbs go off, like, wait, if I can just bring this practice in and I can be a witness every day, and I can step back and observe every day, that doesn't mean that I'm content or not growing in my life, but it just means that I'm taking a second in that gap to see what's happening and not just react to whatever is coming, in front or whatever's happening in front of me. I'm actually taking a moment to witness that experience and then choose how I want to engage, react. And that's growth. That's really growth. It's not about forcing, controlling, pushing. So I know that was a long answer, but that's really where I get so geeked up about my calling and where I feel, really there's a reason why. There's moments where I would think, gosh, why did I have, why was my path, in this corporate world, and how am I supposed to bring in this kind of spiritual aspect? And I realized that's exactly what I'm supposed to do. Is I'm supposed to help people have their spiritual experience every single day. And so having the opportunity to bring that into this space, which is so desperately needed, gets me really excited. So that's when I feel the most hurt.
Well, that's perfect. And what's the saying? The world needs people who come alive and are alive as well. And I'm just going to ask you to go over your story a little bit, just to explain how you came. What your journey was that actually birthed, what you're doing now. And you've kind of spoken it on a little level there as well. Because also, I think the thought, and I know for myself, I've never been fully in a corporate job. I've had quote unquote normal jobs, i.e. I worked normal hours, and I've kind of moved with the mass in terms of like commuted and done that kind of thing. And then I got kind of kicked out maybe like 11, 12 years ago by being made redundant. I had to kind of find my own way through. But then there are still ways that I can see that you are wondering how having like a different viewpoint, and then and first you have a different viewpoint, and then you start to have a different experience, so it becomes really real.
Yes.
And then there's that real kind of tug backwards and forwards. I know that it took a long time for me to just have the tug backwards and forwards of like, I need to go out and make my own money on my own terms. And that can be, but then realizing that, I can work in the first time I ever did like a sales job, and I made in like 4 or 5 days what I used to work a week for. That blew my mind. I'm just like, hang on, why didn't someone tell me this years ago? When you start to shift your own paradigms of what's possible, and then you start to look at everything, and then it starts to bring all of your experiences together. Just if you can talk a little bit about what your journey was into that, and what created your offering and your services.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's a few turning points in life where you just remember those key kind of pivotal moments, and they are super, super clear. And one of them, I have many, but one that came up right now as you were talking is, if you can imagine being in a metro station or a subway or anywhere, my city people, like, where you are literally, this is the vision I have. So I remember one time I was standing on the train platform, and these are commuter trains. So it was like 8 a.m. in the morning, and all the people are rushing out of the trains, and there's just mobs of people. And I'm literally just standing there because now I have to go against the grain, and I have to go through those mobs of people. And this was maybe I'm trying to think, this was, my early 20s. I just started, a job, and I had remembered just thinking so much about how I don't want to be, that song from Dave Matthews came in, Ants Marching. Like, I just don't want to be an ant marching. And I stood there, and I just felt all those people come against the grain. And I said to myself in that moment, I was like, this is a metaphor for something. And it's also, I've also had visions of that being a cover of a book. But nonetheless, I was like, I'm not meant to do this forever. And it was this striking moment where I didn't know what else it was supposed to be, but I was just like, I don't belong here. And I can't see my life just going to work every day, sitting on the train for 45 minutes and driving home for 45 minutes, going to my house that I can barely afford, like just all the things, like the very classic kind of struggle that many of us have. And unfortunately, I did go through a really difficult period, even financially after that, because there was so much, I forgot that moment. And I kind of went through the motions, and all of a sudden, I'll never forget this. When I was pregnant with my first child, I was just about to turn 30, and there was so much pressure about, well, now you're going to have a child, and now you have to have a house. And we were living like downtown Chicago. It was like, you have to have a house, you have to do all these things. And those were pivotal moments where it's like, I wasn't connected enough to my intuition to know that I wasn't listening to what I needed. I was listening to what everyone else around me needed. And it took years to get out from under the anxiety and the pressure of just building a life that was not mine. And I think when I kind of hit rock bottom, it was probably a year after he was born. And I was at a women's event, one of my first ever. My sister was running this organization, and there's only maybe 20 women sitting around the table. And the host asked us to introduce ourselves. And I remember being so excited because I was like, oh, I had this great resume, and I was all the like external things. I had checked all these boxes. And she said, I would like to know your name, and I would like you to share what you're most passionate about. And I just remember feeling this awful pain in the gut of my stomach, like, oh my gosh, I have no idea anymore what I'm passionate about. Like I've completely, and I was this growing up, people would always say like, you have this fire and you have this energy and passion and like, keep it up. And even in my early years of my job, my voice was so silenced because I wasn't doing it the way everyone else was doing it. And so when I lost my voice, then I said, well, I'd rather not speak up because I'm not doing it the right way. And then I'd rather not do this because it's not doing it the right way. Or I shouldn't follow this because that's not what the protocol is. And so there was all these really defining moments in those years where maybe some people were going through very creative experiences and they were trying all these different things. I was taking a path that I thought was the right path, and only to find myself very unhappy with a lot of anxiety. I had postpartum depression. I didn't even know, like just this very kind of hard point in my life. And that moment of not knowing my passion and several other kind of key points were like, this is not how I'm going to live my life. Like it was just this defining moment where I just said, this is it. This is not going to be me. And one of the biggest things I took from that moment on was I need to put myself first. And I need to start taking care of myself, and I need to start doing what I need, because again, in my culture growing up too, even though we lived in Chicago in the US, the Serbian culture was very dominant. And there's very much an embedded martyrdom in how women are viewed and how they show up. And I just said, that's not going to work for me. I don't want to be a bitter old woman feeling like I've given my whole life to everyone else and not have anything to show for it, but not feeling that joy. Like I wanted to feel joy and fulfillment. And I wanted to be a role model for my son. That was like, he looks at his mom like, wow, she feels joy, not she's accomplished something. And that was really, really huge for me. And sorry, I've gone into like a little bit of a tangent, but that process of like getting to that rock bottom was an awesome turning point, because it was a game changer in my life. It was like, okay, that's not going to work anymore. And from there on out, it was all about doing the work, both personal development work, getting deep into my practice, making very clear decisions about what I wanted my life to look like, and not frankly doing anything that anyone else was doing. And I changed a lot of relationships, moved out of the city, we literally moved across the country, because I was at that point then so clear about what I wanted and what I desired our life to look like, that it was time for me to go. It was time for me to move on and have my own experience. And so I basically brought all these tools between, again, the corporate experience and all the personal development and spiritual work, and really just calling it how to be a more conscious feminine leader. Because for me, I learned through the male, like I went up the ranks learning how to do it in a masculine way. And I feel like many of the leaders we have, no dig on them, they're doing amazing things, but many of the women that are in those CEO spots are women, but they're doing it in a very masculine way. And for me, I want to show and demonstrate that you can still have success, and you can run businesses and sell businesses and all the things that I've been doing, and do it in a conscious feminine way. And so that's really what I'm bringing forth in the program. I'm not just helping women make more money, which that is a result. And I'm not just helping them like get ahead in their jobs, but it's really about doing it consciously that's in alignment with what they want. And it's funny because most of the women in the program right now are just working on, how do I set boundaries? How do I communicate more effectively? How do I, what does balance look like for me? And those are the things we're working on, because that creates fulfillment. And when you're fulfilled, people will like you more. They'll give you more money, like all the things, right? All the stuff starts coming. You don't have to be like strategic about, the money, for example, because it does truly come when you've got the other things in alignment.
I like what you just said about boundaries as well. I think that's something that a lot of us are really having to establish in terms of what are our boundaries, because we've been told, I mean, one, it's like boundaries. It's like, one, you don't even know what it is, and like that you can actually start to say, no, I don't want to do this, or no, I'm not comfortable here, or I need time to myself, or this is what I want, or we've never known that. And a lot of the time, I mean, even the other day, I just had to like just place a boundary on it was probably, looking back on it, is no biggie, but I just had to like pinpoint that, you know, this is something that I'm doing and I want to do it this way. Whereas before I would have kind of just given into someone's demand and then kind of like, you know, bitched about it on WhatsApp to somebody else. And that would have been my way of solving it as well. I mean, how are you finding the women that you coach work with their boundaries and kind of start to get comfortable in really setting them up? Because I know the first time that I got to grips with it was uncomfortable, just to say the least, to even acknowledge it.
Definitely. I think it's an evolution too. I think it's an ongoing process. I don't think it's like, okay, I got them off, I'm good, you know? And I don't even know if it's maybe sometimes it's defined as like, you know, I'm putting a wall around myself, or, you know, I'm not letting certain people in. But I love the idea of acceptance without expectation. And so some of the way in which, you know, we can show up even just for others is by setting those boundaries for ourselves. So one example that's big, that's been coming up, a lot of the women naturally that were attracted to me are also recovering perfectionists, which is what I would call myself in, you know, as I explained my story, was this idea that there was something that you could go and catch and achieve, and that was going to be called kind of perfect, or that you could make your life perfect, knowing that that can actually happen. And then there's no award at the end, which is like, you won life. You know what I mean? Like there's no actual award. So a lot of the issues we're dealing with are, you know, overproduction, you know, addiction to achievement, and achievement meaning equaling success, right? And we know, again, for all of us, that success is so unique to ourselves, right? It's not some global definition of what success is. And so it's funny because literally yesterday we were talking about how there's this period in your career where you think that the more you produce, the more like it's going to help you get to the next level. And so I was talking about this inflection point where that actually doesn't work anymore. You get to a point in your career or in your business where just being the producer is not enough. And you start losing creativity in your business. Because if all your energy is put towards just checking all the things off the list, and it's not about reflecting, contemplating, integrating, and coming back and saying, okay, this worked. How do I evolve? How do I elevate it? If it's always on just like getting all your posts out, or get, you know, like all the tactical things. And specifically we work on their calendars. We actually take time and say, where are you being intentional about setting a boundary for your time? I think that is the biggest one. And not even so much about just saying no to others, but saying, if I could create this week in such a way that I was fully supported, and I had exactly what I needed to be successful in my kind of term of what that feels like, what would my week look like? And so we actually map out their calendar, and we work through it and say, well, when would I start my day? And not even that, when would I start meetings? When would I, you know, how would I ask my partner for support? What events would I potentially not go to because let's just say the whole weekend was jammed up? So what would I do differently? And so I think it's coming from this place of being intentional about our time. And then if other people and or things can fit in there, that's great. Versus the opposite, which is letting others dictate your time, letting others kind of take over. And then saying, oh, now I get to squeeze in some self-care because I had a couple hours free. It needs to be the other way around, which is I'm just going to make it up. Like I'll use the bath one, but I'm not really much of a bath person. But let's say you need a bath once a week. That's it. That's not negotiable. That is your time. And then if there is time around it for others and other events, then you do it. But you have, you know, like we make that conscious and intentional that's an intentional boundary. So for me, mostly we're talking about boundaries as it relates to our time and really the trade-off between what we need to feel supported and elevated and, you know, how we can also support others. Because I mean, again, you know this, but I'm just gonna share. If we are not at our best, if we're not fully, feeling complete, we can't be that for others. And as a mother, I would say that is the test that you have every single day. Like I see my levels start to deplete, and I just see the patient, the little fuse starts to just decrease, because you've got these multiple humans and my husband. So there's 3 people, like I'm walking in the house, there's 3 people all talking at the same time. You've got to like command, sorry, no, your listeners can't see me, but I'm really like feeling this. You really have to have command over yourself, and you have to be intentional about how you show up, because you can't be, everything to everyone.
No, it's so good. And like, we can hear it. Don't worry about that. Yeah. and I love that word command as well. I mean, there are lots of kind of like instant things that you can do to kind of like command your space. And, is there one that you would go to that you can like just share right now and say, okay, you walk through the door, and like you say, you've got your daughter and your son and your husband, and everyone wants something from you there and then. How do you find that command so that you're able to address them all, or let them know that you need a moment before you can tend to their needs?
Yeah. So there's probably 2 big things. One is, daily non-negotiable practice. And so that's always about getting in tune with myself, blessing the people around me, supporting them. Maybe I'll add 3. And then number 2 is, especially as any transitions that are happening, whether it's going from a meeting or going into my home or any of those things, I always give myself 1 to 5 minutes of like, okay, I'm taking a deep breath. Now I'm a mom. I'm walking in, now I'm the mom, and whatever else is going on, I'm going to like let that go, and I'm going to be just ultra present. And so I think it's really this idea of presence in general. And that's one of the pillars of conscious feminine leadership is, walking in and going, now I'm the mom, and I'm going to show up in that way for you. But it's always breath, right? So taking that breath like gives you that kind of blank slate to go, okay, I'm here. Like I'm here for you. And then the last one I would say is number 3. And I always would I jokingly with the kids, like if it's kind of getting commotion in the home, or it's rubbed off on my husband too, he'll be like, okay. And you hear the inhale and everyone's like, okay, let's all take it easy. We have this thing we call magic breath. And my son and daughter both do it as a time where, again, things are getting kind of commotion. The last thing I'll share is in the evening, when I'm putting the kids to sleep, we have a whole ritual. And it's not only for them, but it's also for me. And so they fall asleep to mantra every night. Mostly they ask for Satanama. And then recently we've been doing the healing Ramadasa meditation. But it's also a way for me to decompress, to be, again, super present with them, and even just connect physically. I know there's a lot of opinions about kids need to learn how to sleep on their own. There's all these things. And I just say, you do what feels right in your heart. And for us, this ritual is a way for me, if I'm not home during the day, I'm able to really connect with them. And the mantra is a way that has helped all of us just kind of get back to present and really create kind of this relaxing foundation. And then for my kids, I feel like I'm giving them these tools. They're little nuances, and they probably won't realize them. And hopefully when they're older, they'll have them like on their tool belt, just to go, okay, like I always have my breath, or I have this little simple mantra, Satanama, and it's something that's going to help me just get back to center.
And so, and also you always remember what the coping thing is as well, even if you can't put a name to it, And like Mum used to always do this thing, and then suddenly it makes sense. One of the things that I've really I've started to really use again as well, when I just need to kind of like really be firm, is I'm really working up to doing the 1 minute breath, you know, and that can slow you down at any point. It's like, let me just try and do at least 2 rounds of it, of really just kind of like pulling it in and holding it and letting it out, just a few times, to just be like, it's not going to happen, and you can do it in so many times. And also in the times that I've had to travel across town, living in London, and if I'm having to make that journey during the commuter rush hour, like helping back to when you used to commute as well, I'm just glad I know this. It's great that a simple thing as breath, we just really don't realize how important it is, and how important it is to let it work for you, because we just don't breathe. And also it helps me with singing. I know I used to do a lot of deep breathing exercises and control from that, so I know how beneficial it is. So one, it kind of centers me, but one, it also strengthens everything for performance. But yeah, the 1 minute breath is such a great one to use.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
one of my favorites.
And I would share too, like, I definitely see moments when, because people aren't, this kind of going back to boundaries and the breath, especially in these high paced, our company has grown an insane amount in 5 years. And you could sit in your desk and you could work for hours and hours and hours. And I see other people that maybe they're not yet ready or open to maybe receive some of the teachings or whatever. They're just on their own path. But I see how much more now, having some of these tools, how much more difficult it is, how much more they're depleted because they don't have some of those tools. And that's, again, why I'm super passionate about sharing it with women, because we have more, we've got a lot going on hormonally with our cycles, emotionally, right? We talk about having this kind of, exponential power, but also that same kind of destruction in the way in which we engage with others. And so for me, I can so easily see it in a lot of the women leaders and executives, where I'll just see, okay, right now, and I'm not perfect by any means, so I'm not trying to say, but I can see, okay, they're depleted. They're overworked. They've just sent a super emotional email because they're not they haven't taken a second to connect in. And they're super small subtleties. And this is what we were talking about making the leap from even a manager or something, but taking it to this next level of running a business or leading an organization. How, they may not have Kundalini, but I look at some of the top executives in our organization and all over the country. They have some kind of practice, whether, we hear so much morning routine, how you set up your day, moving your body, connecting spiritually, whatever the thing is, we have to have some tool. So for me, I'm like, these aren't the only tools, but they work for me, and I've been able to apply them in a very kind of modern setting. So I love to share them. And that's really what I'm super passionate about. And then on top of it, when you see people having the results, your heart just bursts open, because it's just okay, great. I helped support you. I didn't do it. You did all the work, but sure. I was able to be there to support you. And that feels very clear to me as my calling, my purpose, is to really be able to show people that, hey, if you're a yogi, you don't have to be this prototype yogi that just does all the things that they say yogis do. You can be a yogi in real life too, It doesn't have to be a separate life. So anyway, hopefully that makes sense.
It does. And actually there was something that I wrote down. I think you touched on it just slightly there as well. But when you've got somebody that's coming out of a really corporate setting, a really corporate structure, and maybe they've got an idea of following a heart calling and going into a more entrepreneurial setup as well, how does your program and your work help them with the mindset of that, of you haven't got a structure that's been laid out by this structure of a business. Now you're literally out on your own, and you're in command of all the minutes of your day, from the minute you get up and everything, to do that. Because I mean, not that I ever work with super high powered corporate women, but I've been doing things online, helping people get online, building websites, setting up mailing, emailing sequences and that kind of thing. And it's because the internet makes it look easy, and just because you can get all the things for, set something up very quickly and make a website and do a few hashtags. But I find a lot of the time that people have the ideas, but they get a bit lost in what needs to be done, or they're not as realistic about how long or how much work it's going to take, because you don't have teams and teams of people doing your stuff. And the importance of I think the thing that's going to be hard for a lot of people to hear is not everyone has it in them to be an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think two things probably. One, just to answer your question specifically, but I want to hit on the non-entrepreneur thing, is some of the things that make the piece that I'm working on mostly with folks is trusting their intuition, because when they come from a corporate setting, they have, generally speaking, they have some discipline around habits, getting things done, being, I'm saying disciplined again, but just being consistent, like as an entrepreneur, there's a level of consistency that's required in terms of output. So some of that they have. The place where it's really shaky is the belief in self, worth, the ability to go, you can do your schedule however you want into like work, and playing with that and figuring out, when am I the most energetic? When do I want to get, or when do I want to be on calls with people? When do I want to go inside and really go in and be creative about? And so usually the big thing on my end, Carol, is there's this, again, this balance between production, because they're usually production oriented individuals, or they've been cultivated in that way, right? Conditioned. And so it's about, how do I trust my intuition? How do I create a brand that is me? And what is me? What does that even look like? Yeah. And how can I stand in my authenticity? Like, those are the things that are hard, because so much of like the corporate conditioning is like, you come in, you do this thing, you get this done, and someone rewards you. And when you're an entrepreneur, it's not like that. Like, no one's like patting your back every time you do something, you know what I mean? And so it's about finding that own level of self-fulfillment, and the calling has to be so good that you don't really need that kind of validation all the time, right? Obviously you want some of that support. And then when you said about becoming an entrepreneur, I do think a lot of people think, okay, this is easy. Like, I'll just go do this on my own. Or what I'm seeing is many women that are like, is there a way for me to have fulfillment and not take the leap and become an entrepreneur? Because not everyone, and most of the women that I think about now, probably about 5 of them currently that are in my program, are like, you have shown me that there's an opportunity or a possibility to have everything I want, but not necessarily have to go work for myself. Mm-hmm. Because they're seeing me right now in both roles. So I'm doing this, thing. I've started this thing on the side. I still have my current job as a leader in the organization. And they're like, well, how are you doing that? And so part of even what I'm talking about is, how can you set yourself up to have more ease, grace, and flow in your life, and do all the things and not have it feel so hard, like the hustle and the grind I was saying the other day. And the last piece I'll add is, we also do think, Carol, that we have to do everything alone. But what I'll tell you is, when I became so clear in my vision and I shared that with others, they also became like magnified by it. Like they were like, oh my gosh, this is exciting. So I actually have a couple of people that are working for me for free. So this is what I also would say to other entrepreneurs, like, you don't have to do it alone. And because for me, I love working with teams. I love bouncing ideas back and forth and socializing things with people. I wouldn't be happy if I was just by myself, like doing the work. And so I've just accepted it. And at first I was like, oh, are they going to like look for, and I was honest. I was like, I can't pay you right away, all this stuff. And they were like, I'm really passionate about what you're doing, and I would just love to be a part of it. Here are some ways they would even share with me, like, here are some ways that I think maybe I could help you. And then in return, like, they are kind of part of the coaching program, or they're part of, they just kind of get to be along for the ride too and participate. And so that's been very lucrative and helpful for me. And then the last thing I will say is, I'm also part of a mastermind myself. So I'm also getting support from other women entrepreneurs, and I'm learning lessons from them because they've already been in my shoes. And that support is just invaluable. I mean, that has been for me, it's just given me the, I'm going to say support again, but it's given me like the confidence, I would probably say even more, that you can do something that other people don't understand and is intangible. Because it's so hard to tell someone, well, you're going to get fulfillment. What does that really mean, right? It's like not a certificate. It's not a degree. And so
letters after your name.
Yeah. Right. It's like, work with me for 6 months and you'll feel more fulfilled. Anyway, but it's really about, having the confidence that if there's a few people that get it, how can they continue to help spread the message? How can they continue to share the tools and the teachings and the offerings? And I think you and I have both witnessed how that can be. Those are kind of my 3 things. I definitely think there's different buckets. And I think as entrepreneurs, Two, having a support system outside of, ourselves is also important, even though we're like, we can do it and all that stuff. I think it's really important as well.
Which I think is probably the we can do it, let's grind until, we're our nails are down to stubs is a very kind of male hustle, entrepreneur mindset. And you've got to work you've got to work and you've got to keep at it, but there's no reason why you should grind everything down to the nub as well. And also talking about how women are showing up in the corporate world in leadership roles. How is that now starting to look like with a more feminine, I wanted to say edge, but edge is the wrong word. With a more feminine curve to it than it has been previously?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just this idea of not exactly what you said, of not having to grind it out in order to get the outcomes. And I have, over the years, have set very clear boundaries, and I have worked late and I've worked in the evenings and I've worked on the weekends, but it's been when I've been fully connected to and aligned with a project that serves both me and broadly the company and the values. And so what I see a lot of times with women is because we want to have, whether it's perfection or we want to get all the things done on the list, I often run into women feeling burnt out because they're literally trying to do everything. And so here's where I would say that actually how the intersection between the masculine and feminine is actually quite powerful, because what you'll actually see from most male counterparts, they will never try to do all the things. They will never try to do 100% or 130% of the list. They will literally pick the top 4 projects that have the highest visibility, that have the most impact, and that will also be something they can share and brag about because they're also helping their own personal brand. Those are the things they work on. And so when you're very clear that, and this to me, so what I share with most of the women is get really clear about, we get really clear about what are the bodies of work or projects or things that are really going to propel either their business, because if they are working for themselves, or their career forward. That's where we focus. And we don't diffuse the energy by working on the long tail of things that are maybe, just not as important. And when we can do those 3 to 4 things with just this like highest, vibration and this highest, we put our whole selves into those. To me, that things start to flow from there. And you're in alignment. And when you're in alignment, all the things start to flow. And you don't have to, again, this goes back to energy. I was writing this whole thing about, we have to be conscious. This goes back to boundaries, but we have to be conscious, not just of our time, but of our energy. And if we're putting energy into things that aren't giving us a return, then should we be doing them? Right. And those are the questions. And it's really getting into a practice of asking ourselves that. So if I think about what it means to be a more conscious feminine leader in the corporate environment, it's more presence, it's listening, right? It's really listening. And you just see like so much more output and so much more support and loyalty from the people that you support when you actually are present and focused and you listen to them. It's more intentionality about your time, because when you are intentional, and when I share with my team, hey, here's my strategy for how to maximize my time, they're like, oh, wow, she doesn't expect me to work a bazillion hours. She expects me to be really intentional about how I show up and focused. And then I get, like Carol, I get exponential kind of results from that. I mean, my teams just show up in ways that I never even thought was possible, because I gave them that creativity to do their own thing and maximize their time and energy in a way that feels right for them. And then the last one I would call is devotion. To me, that's really I would call it the feminine word for discipline, because I think it's a deeper expression of discipline, but it's devotion to yourself, to your cause, to your people. And it's showing up in this way consistently in alignment and in integrity. And so to me, those are the ways that what I would call, conscious feminine leadership, like that's how it's showing up to me. And I'm seeing it more and more. And I'm even seeing it, I shouldn't say it that way, but I'm seeing it from men as well. I'm seeing this. It's not just about, let me ask you about your kids. That's not what I mean about femininity, right? It's about, how can I be more compassionate and listen to what you're going through, even if it has zero quote unquote impact on the job. And the last piece I'll say on this is, when we're going through change, or organizations are going through change, or people are going through change, as leaders, sometimes it's not about getting them to understand why, or yes, that's important. Sometimes it's just about listening to what they're feeling. What is the change bringing up for them? Are they feeling uncertain? Are they feeling, are they questioning the fairness of it or the validity? And literally just listening. And I've tried this now multiple times. I haven't adjusted the change. We still went through with the thing, but the amount of adoption I got because I just listened to how people felt about it, I didn't even have to do anything else. I literally just was there as a sounding board and as a support mechanism. And they were like, okay, thank you for listening to me. I think I get it. I'm on board. Like, nothing changed. So that to me is how we bring the feminine in, not just as women, but as leaders collectively, male, female, into the mix. And we show people that we truly are here to serve them, not, tell them what they need to do.
That's so great. And when you were speaking, there were like a couple of words I wrote down, like I've got to kind of, just to give you props about the way that you're doing it, because I suppose in our past we've all unfortunately had a toxic female manager or anything like that. We, so we've been like, when I grow up, I'm never going to be that woman. But, the way that you were speaking about how you work with your team as well was, one, for it to be really respectful. And if you can stand there and you've got very big visions, you've got very clear goals as well. So you're respectful in that you're not vague, because sometimes people do come with this kind of wishy-washy idea of, they're not really sure what they want to, they're not really good at communicating, then they expect you to fill in the gaps, and then it gets really passive aggressive when you're not guessing what's in their head, because they haven't told you what they wanted, and then you haven't mind read what they want, so then there's this thing of like, well, I don't want that. It's like, so you get a series of no's, this is not what I want, as opposed to this is what we're aiming for. So it's respectful, it's really powerful, and it's powerful within yourself as well, knowing that you can, if something isn't what you want, or if someone's not working in a certain way, that you'd be able to say, this is not what I want, this is the way to do it, and having the power in yourself and the respect for yourself and them to know that, sometimes a no doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just like, we're kind of veering off the thing, as opposed to like cutting each other down, which is where the old kind of programming of like, there's this one seat that we're all trying to get to, sister, and we'll claw each way to it. So it's nice to hear that there are these, there are feminine leaders like yourself that have got a lot on their plate, because you're handling a lot of things, aren't you, really? You've got family and a relationship, and then you're two businesses and leading other women. And also I wanted to just find out from you, a couple of years after the whole Me Too movement within the workplace, and men kind of reconfiguring what is respectful, what boundaries they can cross, how they address women, what they can say, what they can't say, what is construed as assault in some ways as well, or how have you seen that show up in your workplace, and how women have adapted to it, and then how men have adapted to it as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe a couple things to start. The first is, I definitely have had experiences, and probably one that I can share that sounds comical now is, after I returned from maternity leave, I was standing at a copier. This was before I was a partner in this current company. I was in this big $1 billion organization. I'm standing at a copier and getting something, and this gentleman walks by me and he's like, "Damn girl, you bounced back." after coming back from maternity leave. And
wow.
Like, yeah, I know. So, I mean, again, it's like, it's funny and comical now. And I've been fortunate that even when I shared that situation with other leaders, that everyone had my back, both male and female, right? So everyone was like, that's not acceptable. Let's talk about that. I've also had other situations that I've had to leave companies in my earlier years where there were inappropriate things that happened. But specifically after Me Too, and there were a few things that happened with our old owners. Our executive team came together, and we've always been fortunate enough where some of, the male leaders would go, okay, they would actually even ask, what are the messages we need to communicate? Or these are the messages we think we need to convey as a result. Or there was one situation where a gentleman said something that he didn't realize was inappropriate. And so we raised that immediately and said, okay, how can we support him? Because he tended, again, not generalizing, but, he was in his late 50s, early 60s. So a little bit of a generational thing. And again, and not realizing, he didn't realize. And so we immediately raised those issues and got support and helped him, frankly. So instead of just being like, okay, now we're going to ostracize and say, call him Chris. Chris was just not, Chris is not getting it. He's like this horrible person. It's like, how can we help people understand that there are other perspectives, or there are other ways in which people can take what you say, and how can we help you learn? And that's a big thing. Like when I joined this company when the founder sold it, and we were the leadership team that came in to grow it. And it was a very cool experience because we were able to lay the foundation and create the culture. And we were able to be very clear about what we wanted. And being a learning culture was really important to us. And that is in all facets. It's not just in the work that we do and improving our processes and things like that, but it was in the way that we work together as a team, how important trust is, how we speak to each other. And I will say we still have a little ways to go. We've still been a little more heavy on the executive team. We're still heavier on the male side. But we're making progress. But I would just say for me, it was really critical to see our CEO and others in those positions stand up immediately when there were it's one thing to go up and say something as a speech when there's stuff happening in the external kind of world, and it's another thing to see when you take action based on what's happening in your house, right, in your own place, and you go, okay, how am I responding to this, and how am I being the example for the rest of the organization for how we're going to show up.
It's something that I've always wondered, because not to say the dust has settled, but the kind of the awareness of it was so big at the time. And then of course there are quite prominent cases happening at the moment.
Yeah.
But, it's not at the forefront of the newsreel at the moment. We've kind of shifted into another thing. So it's just wondering, now that got uncovered a couple of years later, what does that mean in real terms, in terms of going forward? So, thank you for opening some light on that as well.
I mean, Carol, I think we still have a long way to go in terms of just compensation. If I just think about, okay, where is it showing up in, maybe not in kind of this like exploitation, discrimination and kind of that way, but more in, well, how are we valuing a woman's contribution? We are not valuing it equally. We know that. But the fact that it is showing up even in the place where I have such a huge role and such a huge responsibility is something that I've struggled with, to say, okay, well, this is our house and we have control over this. And so what are we doing about it? Because it's not just about the money, it's about what we value. And it's a reflection of what we value. And so to me, we've got a lot more work to do there.
I just wanted you to just speak a little bit more before we go into the end bit, just about your project, The Will, and how it was born and what you're creating for women.
I love I love Instagram. I love kind of sharing wisdom around not only women's issues and practices and kind of being this more intentional woman. The Will actually stands for the Woman's Intentional Life Lessons. And it's really it's a container, a sacred container for women to feel heard, to feel supported, and, without sounding overly conceited here, to experience a transformation. Because I've had the opportunity to be in many different women's groups, and that, in my first in my first year in a women's group, I had the opportunity to go and write a paper. My topic was how we've lost so much of what was great about tribal mentality, and how can we take elements and aspects of that and apply it to modern life. And one of the biggest things was just this idea of having a women's community, having a place where, you know, my grandmother used to have, when she was young and had her children, like the women got together every afternoon for coffee at her house or another woman's house in the neighborhood. And so that's where they would share their stories and they would share their tips and they would support each other. And they had that every single day. And this transition, when we kind of moved into this technological age, was where we're more decentralized. And now we have technology, which is amazing. So how can we leverage technology to simulate those communities? And how can we do it more intentionally? So the opportunity is, well, if you didn't like your neighbors, you were still hanging out with them every day, right? My grandma was still having coffee with them every day. But now I think the opportunity we have is to be choosy. We can be the mastermind that I'm in. Every single woman that's in that mastermind is way ahead of me. And so for me, it's an opportunity to learn from these amazing women that are doing awesome things in the world. And so how, in a way, irresponsible would it be for me? Like I've had all these experiences that I can share and I can teach, and to not be able to help the woman that, you know, and again, not that this is like a down or up thing, but just that's right behind, right? Yeah. And grab her hand and pull her over and go, here, it doesn't have to be that hard. And you don't have to doesn't have to take 7 years or whatever, you know, like, let me support you along the way. But also why I do some one-on-one coaching, but I'm very passionate about the mastermind and the group coaching and the will, because the learning from each other is exponential. And oftentimes when when one of the women has a question, it's exactly what someone else needed to hear that day. And they just didn't know that they were feeling that. And so just watching how that evolves has been amazing. In the will, there's over 30 lessons. It includes meditations and yoga, practices and videos as well. But the lessons are really helping you create this roadmap and helping you move from clarity and self-care, which is the boundaries we talked about, and then even tactically move into business, money mindset, how to manifest. Like, it's basically a whole roadmap that takes you through how to live a more fulfilled and intentional life. And depending on where you're at, certain lessons may be more applicable or where you feel really drawn and pulled. And I absolutely share tactical things and strategies, literally how to prepare you for an interview, literally how to prepare you, like the things. But what I do and what I feel differentiates this program from maybe some others, or where others may feel the support that's needed, is really around being an energetic match for what you desire. Those interviews, I can teach someone how to nail an interview, but if it's not the right it's not the right job, or it's not the right, I'm teaching them how to distinguish between just getting a job for job's sake and really connecting to and being aligned with, is this person, is this environment the right opportunity for me, is aligned with what I should be doing. And most of the time we don't know what alignment is. And so I'm really just helping them create that connection to their inner guide to be able to recognize, I also have a choice in this. And I'm making the decision to be intentional about what I want my life to look like, to construct it. Financial independence is another way that we talk a lot about that. And I create plans for them. Here's how you can do it. Let's work on the plan. And the moment someone has, they've been freaking out about their debt forever, and then they put it all down on paper and we work through it together. And even if it's years, right, where they need years before they get financial freedom, they have a path. And all of a sudden the pressure goes down, because it's like, I can see my way forward. And that's really what I'm just trying to offer, is basically being able to share, here are some lessons and here are some tools that really worked for me and are helping me do this without, I have bad days, but without a lot of hustle. I'm just feeling in flow, and I'm very connected to, what I believe is kind of my divine calling. and how I use these tools that sometimes seem esoteric in very practical kind of business settings. And they've been very effective for me. So I love to, sorry, again, I can talk about it forever because I love it. But really I'm trying to create that container and hopefully that helps people really.
Perfect. Fantastic. Thank you very much. So let's wrap up then and ask these few questions for you. So the first is, what is the best piece of advice a woman has ever given to you?
It was actually a bit of parenting advice from a friend's grandmother, but I think it can actually apply more broadly. She said, you can't spoil a child with love. It always comes up in my life, not because just being a parent, but in this role as a leader or in any role that we fill, thinking about this idea that, you know, we have to make others tough, or we have to make them independent, or again, whether it's even our partners. And I always come back to this idea like, oh, if you can't spoil people with love, you can't spoil your child with love. That means that you're always giving in a way that is unconditional, in a way that is pure, accepting, you know, just all these things start to conjure up, even though, like I said, it doesn't have to necessarily be applied to a child. Mm-hmm. And there's just something I love about that. If you're a conscious feminine leader, you are giving, you're compassionate, you know, and if you come from a place of love, even if you're in manufacturing, like it's really what you bring forward, in your own unique way, in your most authentic way. And I mean, it all comes, I don't talk about love a lot because I know there's like a lot of, it's a loaded term, but in the most kind of unconditional, compassionate sense, I would say, yeah, that's my best advice.
Beautiful, beautiful. And what woman would you say represents higher energetic resonance?
I'm going to have to go the easy route and say my mom. Like the typical answer. And I know most of you don't know my mother, but, you know, despite talking about the martyrdom, and maybe creating some forgiveness around that, she's someone that is she's, you know, there's a joke about, you know, the man is the head and the woman is the neck, you know? And so my mom is absolutely the neck in our family and our community. And she led, you know, she was a stay-at-home mom. And so for a lot of years I battled with that, not thinking that I was the right kind of mother because I was doing it totally different. And she never gave herself enough credit for all she did, but she was the president of our church and our Sunday school. And there was so many children that even to this day, I can see the way they look at her as this like mother figure. And to me, taking that kind of unconditional love and that support and that compassion, you know, irrespective of how we live our lives, like that's the essence, like that's the piece that to me is what I want to embody. And she's that example. And I think we can all probably say there's something we learned from our mothers, intentionally, unintentionally, you know, the things we wanted to or didn't want to, or maybe have to learn the hard way. But the way she stood up for people that didn't have a voice and the way she led in ways that are very different than I'm leading, it doesn't matter. You know, it's really this kind of beautiful example of what women can do when they step into their power. Perfect. And that's why I talk a lot about owning your power, standing in your power.
Yeah.
Like such a big part of that program.
Thank you. That's a great one as well. And I think a lot of the time, so much goes unrewarded for mothers, especially if they don't have the traditional worldly, you know, they don't have a business card with a thing. But like you say, if she's in the community, if she's in the church, that's helping on a mass level. That's leadership on a level that more so than what you would get paid for, because you're doing it for no financial compensation. Yes. That in itself, you know, if you can do more for that. I mean, when you spoke of that in the church, I remember one time my mom, and people speak about it to this day, bought a load of red recorders and just gave them out to all the kids, you know, and just knowing how we grew up, there was really not that much money around, but people remember that, I remember your mom came and gave all these red recorders out. So it sticks with people a lot longer, when they do these like small but really significant things that will stick in people's minds as memories that's pivotal to them, and they remember that thing. That's powerful, because many big, high-powered people don't really make that much of a positive impact on an emotional level like that. They might be leading, but they may not really affect someone's heart. And that's a different kind of achievement. And so not many people do that. And with all that you do, what are your favorite self-care rituals and practices?
So probably one of my favorites is walking in nature. So being in the city for more than a decade, living downtown, I never realized how much I needed, we moved out to the East Coast, and I never realized the power of being in nature. And this is going to sound really funny, but like talking to a tree.
Oh gosh. Yeah. I was just thinking that as well. I love to go and sit by a tree. It is super powerful.
Yeah. And there's actually a tree meditation, which I need to find, but so I love doing that. And I love being, even when I'm with my kids, I think it's more about how can I stay present. Any moment where I can be present is a way for me to refill. And it's a way that I'm refilling my cup. And then, my practice is just game changer. So the days that I can have a 2-hour practice where I'm doing yoga for half and another half meditations, I feel that is definitely my superpower. I love to journal too. I love to write. And I love to find ways to express that and share it with others. And probably I would say the other big thing, which sounds really geeky as a self-care ritual, but when I learn, sharing is actually a ritual. Like it's something that lights me up and it fills me up. And if I go too many consecutive days where maybe I'm just like in my head and I'm just working and I'm not kind of creating, and sharing, I definitely I can feel not as high vibrational, maybe, if there's a way to describe it. I know I shared I'm not too big on baths, but I definitely do them more from a health perspective. I know it's just good for my body. And usually when I'm in there, I can also, this is so bad, like multitasking. If I do a meditation in the bath, then it's like, it's like too but that's definitely something that's important. And then my husband and I, especially since after we had kids, having time together, we actually started going on walks together and not just kind of going out for dinner or doing, money, like spending, like we don't always have to just spend money to hang out. And it's been kind of something that we've been challenging, that status quo and the, dinner and a movie and the, all the things, especially if we want to live a more healthy life. And so we do like day dates where we go for walks or we go play tennis or, any kind of movement. I love most sports, I would say, like not baseball, but most sports and stuff like I'll play basketball against him. And those are ways where we're moving our body, we're connecting, we're outside. That's really important to me. Having that connection with him is really important because he's like my ride or die right now. So that's
good for you.
And then friends, right? Like I'm giving you a long list, but the reason is this is what I do with the women as well, is we have to get really clear about the things that light us up. And we have to do more of those things, not when they're convenient, not when like 3 weeks has gone by and we feel miserable, right? And go, okay, now I got to call up my girlfriend. But it's, that's an area where I do need to do a little bit better job of making sure that I'm keeping those girlfriend relationships outside of my mastermind and the group and the work, just all the different things. It's just going and having a cup of coffee or a cup of tea with a friend. Like that also fills me up. And that's an area I need to work on a little bit more and be more conscious and intentional about making that time. So
good.
That's it. Yeah.
And can you just say what's coming up next for you? If you've got any kind of new programs, events coming up, anything that you might be doing, and also just let us know where we can find you, like your social media.
Yeah, absolutely. So my social or Instagram handle is Spirit Soul Exec. And I'm also on Facebook the same way, but I love Instagram. So find me there. The big thing that's coming up is we're doing our first in-person retreat in May in Maine, May 1st to May 3rd. In Elliott, Maine. It's only an hour from Boston, less than an hour from Boston, and a bunch of other bigger airports. But the exciting part is, as part of the Will Mastermind, if anyone joins, they get the retreat for free. So they are able to join and have an in-person experience in addition to becoming part of the mastermind. Includes group coaching, one-on-one coaching, hopefully all the things, the lessons, everything. But that's big. And we're really just going in April is when we're really moving into the next session of the Will. So starting to take applications and booking calls and things like that, but really, really excited about that. And then also starting in April, I'll be starting to do some speaking engagements, which I like to share. I'll probably share some of those with my online community as well. So I know people are not on the East Coast, but those are the big things. The Will Mastermind, I'm super passionate about that, really excited, and taking applications. So please reach out if you're interested. And then our big retreat, May 1st to May 3rd.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And that's
Carol.
That's it. I just want to say thank you for coming and being a part of her conversations. We've kind of known each other, like, as well as you can know somebody on the internet
I know.
for a while. So it's been great that, now that I've come back and I'm getting everything up and running again, that I'm really getting a really super bunch of women to really tell what's happening in their lives and being part of like her conversations and everything that is higher energetic resonance women. So thank you.
All right, it's good stuff. Thanks, Carol.
Thank you again, Jelena, for being a guest on this week's Her Conversations, and thank you for listening. You can find out more about me on my website, which is carolmaywhittick.com. That's carolmaywhittick.com. You can also follow me on Facebook under the same name, and Twitter and Instagram. My handle is Kazmic. That's at CAZMICK. So until next week and the next episode, take care. Bye.